Yeah, I think there's some truth to it. I think that makes sense. Uh, you know, why is gold more valued than other, like iron or aluminum, right? Because it's difficult to mine, it has
Mhm.
limited supply, right? It's hard to kind of produce. Limited supply gives that, but it's not only the limited supply, but also is decentralization nature, right? I mean, you can
Mhm.
think of certain chains like Ethereum, there's this core devs, Solana, there are these folks or whatnot, right? But who actually owns Bitcoin? You, me, everybody. Who controls Bitcoin? You, me, everybody. There's not a fixed group of people that you can necessarily go after and say, hey, shut it down, right? And I think that's
Right.
decentralization nature of it that nobody controls it, nobody owns it. Even government entities don't control or have influence over. Nobody can go and say, hey, you know what? Let's just change it to 30 million tomorrow. I think that's what makes it
Mhm.
more hard money rather than this limited supply. It's complete decentralization and the fact that we all control it, but nobody controls it.
Right, absolutely. And makes it certainly a little. People say gold is like hard cap, but they're mining like I think 1 to 2% of the gold supply like every year is new. So to me, that's kind of like that sounds a lot like inflation, especially if we ever get one of those meteors that has like $4 trillion worth of gold, then gold prices are going to absolutely crater.
Right,
But
right.
I don't think we're there just yet. But I do want to talk more about gold, so stay tuned, Lee. We're going to bring it back in just a second because gold just hit another record high itself, and Bitcoin is well right behind it, breathing down its shiny little neck. Assets under management for gold ETFs are sitting at about $180 billion. Bitcoin ETFs already closing in at $160 billion. Not too bad for a market that's barely old enough to rent a car, while gold's been flexing since ancient Egypt. Gold's big advantage, well, the central banks. They scooped up over 1,000 metric tons last year, triple their usual average. How much Bitcoin did they buy? Zero. Because central bankers would rather buy more paper debt than admit the internet made better money than they did. Meanwhile, Bitcoin ETFs are the new hot ticket. Louis Laval at Frontier Investments said ETFs legitimized it for many investors, which is finance speak for suddenly all the same guys who called Bitcoin a scam are now collecting management fees off of it. Gold futures are up 36% this year, sitting at almost 3,600 bucks an ounce. Bitcoin is up 18.5% year to date, trading around 110 currently after peaking as high as 124K earlier last month. Gold may have more history here, but Bitcoin keeps proving it doesn't need 1,000 years to move the needle, just a few good bull runs and a Twitter account. Critics love to say that gold has centuries of crisis performance, which is true. It survived plagues, wars, and depressions. But all that history still doesn't change the fact that you can't email a gold bar. Bitcoin, on the other hand, has only been around for about 15 years and has already gone toe to toe with central banks, regulators, and Kim Kardashian's crypto endorsements. Gold's relentless bull market is apparently running on stealth mode. U.S. investors aren't piling in. August saw new U.S. gold demand drop 14.3% from July and 27.4% from the 12-month average. Or in other words, Americans would rather buy Apple stock or another iPhone than a lump of metal that just sits there. Asia's still buying gold like it's going out of style, but Western investors, not so much. Which is ironic because US policy under Trump is helping drive gold demand abroad, even while he's simultaneously setting up a Bitcoin strategic reserve here at home. Only in 2025 do you get a president moonlighting both sides of the market at the same time. So, what's the better play? Well, analysts like Juan Leon at Bitwise says it isn't Bitcoin or gold, it's probably both. Gold is stable. Bitcoin is explosive. Gold is the Volvo. Bitcoin is the Tesla with rocket boosters and questionable autopilot. Both are moving off the same thesis. Nobody trusts sovereign debt anymore. The difference is one asset is literally ancient history, the other is the future, and it's catching up and fast. We're bringing Lee back. Lee, Bitcoin ETFs are already at $160 billion AUM, nearly catching gold's $180 billion. What does that say to you about Bitcoin's speed of adoption compared to an asset that's been trusted since pharaohs were a thing?
Yeah, so I think like you got to look at the timeline of this adoption, right? The ETFs were launched just a few years ago, and and I think you said it, gold has been there since Bronze Age, Coin Age, like thousand, I don't even know how many few hundreds of years ago, right?
Yeah.
But also you have to think how long the internet has been there. Not that long ago in human history, right? And if you look
Right.
at that context, that if internet has not been there so long ago, right? And Bitcoin has taken quite a bit of chunk of the time in adoption. And Bitcoin is it's internet's goal, right? It's much more easier to carry. It's much more easier to, you know, pass it over in your will or inheritance, easier to manage. Like I can't really have, 10 gold bars lying around. I do have to trust the custodian. And that's where kind of Bitcoin shines, right? And I think it's just a matter of time where Bitcoin can definitely be a strong competitor to gold, but gold is definitely not going anywhere because it also comes with like tradition, history, and some folks across will always like gold. But I think Bitcoin is definitely gonna give a healthy competition to gold markets, and it already has.
Yeah, but with that being said, critics always say gold has centuries of crisis performance, while Bitcoin only has 15 years. So, do you think Bitcoin's short but chaotic history, I mean, we're talking about surviving bans, crashes, celebrity endorsements, actually proves resilience faster than gold ever did? And a big part of that's probably because of the internet, right?
Yes, yes, it does. And I think that's a really good point you bring up. Like, you got to think of like as a cockroach, right? You can't really, it's so hard to kill a cockroach, right? And Bitcoin has survived so many of these bottlenecks, right? And
Right.
many currencies across throughout history has gone through the same, and that kind of tells it that Bitcoin is truly a winner, right? Even few years ago, you would not even think about being Bitcoin being comparable to gold. It was like some scam coin that people were using for, nefarious activities. But today you can see that, countries are thinking about putting it on their balance sheet. I mean, in 15 years, or, I think that's a one heck of a, run up and change in reputation, if you will, for an asset class.
Yeah, it kind of seems like because of the internet and how much faster things and information and ideas move today, it feels like Bitcoin kind of got all of gold's crash course in perseverance in a much shorter time window. It reminds me, if you ever saw the early Adam Sandler movie, Billy Madison, he goes back to high school and he has to do all of school from kindergarten through high school in 2 weeks'
Right.
time to prove that like he's battle tested enough to take over his dad's company. That's kind of been Bitcoin's journey, I feel like, akin to
Right.
gold, but just compressed because it's had so many more challenges due to the fact that the internet and information is able to spread more quickly than ever. So it's interesting to see how this
Absolutely.
is all working out. It feels battle tested, like you said. I would
Yeah,
concur for sure.
absolutely. And I think
Our,
and I think
yeah.
that internet and the information across the internet makes markets more efficient in a faster way. And I think that's what happened to Bitcoin, right? With a lot of information in a quick amount of time, markets are just picking the winner.
Yeah, and conversations that used to take hundreds of years to spread globally are happening in mere minutes. So you have plenty of detractors, but then you have people being like, well, there's this, answering those detractors in almost real time. So, that's why it's no big surprise this thing is moving so much faster than I think we probably ever could have anticipated, at least compared to gold. So good stuff on the horizon
Exactly.
for us. All right, Lee, it's time for our deep dive. Let's run the stinger, guys, and get on into it. All right, Lee, it's time for our deep dive. We're going to get a little bit of a better picture of you and Torum and everything you and the guys over there are up to. We got a little bit about your background earlier. You have been in the space for now over a decade. You've worn a lot of hats. Now you're at Torum. Torum's tagline is basically make Bitcoin great again. Give me the
Right.
short version. What does Torum actually do for people who still think Bitcoin can't do anything except sit in cold storage?
Yeah, sure. To give some context, right? So a lot of innovation in the Bitcoin space has been derived from Ethereum, right? In the sense that, people saw how things are done in Ethereum world, a lot of modular infrastructure fragmented, right? You have like execution layer here, consensus here, data availability here, and that's what they brought to Bitcoin, right? But we believe that that's not the right way to build on Bitcoin. Why? Because Bitcoin is a monolithic chain by its nature. It's a whole, right? And that's what Torum brings to Bitcoin, a monolithic solution to Bitcoin network. So we are the only fully unfragmented infrastructure built on top of Bitcoin. We're a proof of stake network on top of Bitcoin that solves all the problems that you need to build institutional applications like stablecoins, real world assets, collateral lending and borrowing on top of Bitcoin as natively as you can.
Very good, very good. And I was reading about you before we had you on the show. I got to do my due diligences before I have you on. And I read that you've said Torum cures Bitcoin's limitations and amplifies its strengths. Can you unpack that a little bit for me? Like, what do you mean by that?
Sure. So what are Bitcoin's strengths, right? Complete decentralization, right? Its security model, and also any type of assets that can live on Bitcoin, right? Which is, taproot assets or any type of different types of assets, right? What are its limitations? It does not have an account model like a smart contracts. You can't really do complex logics, right? So smart contracts are what allows you to do complex applications like stable coins, pooling together, DEXs, right? And also it does not have an oracle. So without off-chain data, right? How do you do liquidations? How do you do staking amounts? Without an oracle, smart contracts are basically like a computer without an internet. So Torum brings the oracle network in a decentralized manner and also brings smart contracts to Bitcoin while keeping its strengths, right? We have developed a new type of asset standard that lives natively on Bitcoin, right? And as well as the same, you get the, I would say, other strengths from what a blockchain basically needs to build these kind of applications.
Got it. And how would you say that Torum's approach differs from Bitcoin layer twos and side chains out there like Stacks or Rootstock? Like, why stay native to Bitcoin L1?
Right. So if I ask you, like, let me build an application for you on Ethereum, but you're going to get your tokens in Solana. Does that make sense to you? I'll tell you that, hey, you are a user in Solana, but here is some ERC20 token for you. It doesn't make sense, right? Or what if I tell you that, okay, you know what? You are a DeFi user in Ethereum, but you know what? I liquidated you at 100K, but that price is actually stored in Binance chain. You'll be like, dude, why are you liquidating me on Binance chain's price, right? And that's are the current limitations of these Bitcoin L2s or other ecosystems. You get liquidated. You are using an oracle from different network. You do not have the assets on your chain. So that's why living on Bitcoin L1 is important, right? Because now you have an application where you own the assets on the Bitcoin L1. It is not an ERC20 token. It is not a Solana token. It's indeed a Bitcoin native asset, right? And if I'm going to liquidate you for 100K, your data is stored in Bitcoin network. It's not something I'm pulling from Ethereum on other networks or other side chains. It's indeed stored in Bitcoin. And that's why it's important.